Have you ever heard of the name Mack Robinson? I had not heard of Mack Robinson until I recently read this book that mentioned him, and I became fascinated by his story. As the story goes, Mack Robinson was this amazing sprinter, and in the 1936 Olympics, Summer Olympics over in Germany, he broke the record for the 200-meter dash. The previous record was run at 21.2 seconds. Mack Robinson ran that race 21.1 seconds. So by a tenth of a second, Mack Robinson broke the record. Brother could fly. Brother could fly. And I imagine over there in Germany, they were none too pleased as he received quite a number of boos as he was running the race. And because he broke the record at 21.1 seconds, he was able to complete the race, finishing off in second place. You heard me correctly. He finished the race in second place, even though he broke the previous record. Because you see, on that same track, on that same day, at that same moment as they're running the race, there was another man who finished running that race in 20.7 seconds, smashing the previous record. And you know his name. Oh, we all know his name, Jesse Owens. Oh, Jesse Owens, one of the greatest athletes of all time. Everybody knows Jesse Owens. Everybody knows what he did over in the Olympics over there, how he was booed fervently by the spectators because he was a black man. And Mack Robinson was booed fervently over in Germany because he was a black man. But this wasn't new to either Jesse or Mack. After all, they lived in a country that knew a thing or two about booing black people. Came from America, a place that was full with segregation and hatred because of their skin color. Seeing people like Mack Robinson and Jesse Owens as being inferior, man, booing, that was nothing to them. And Jesse Owens, even after winning the gold medal in the 200-meter dash, when he came back home, he was the only one who was not allowed or not invited to the White House to shake the president's hand because he was a black man. And he finished first. So Mack Robinson, well, he knew he was in it, finishing off second. You might as well finish off last. Because coming back to a segregated America, there'd be nobody talking about Mack Robinson. And he came home, and as the story goes, he quietly lived out the rest of his life working as a janitor in a segregated all-white school. That's the story of Mack Robinson. And that's when it got me thinking that maybe that's not all the story of Mack Robinson. That maybe that 4/10 of a second, and if he did well enough, that 5/10 of a second or half second, if he ran faster than that he would receive the fame that Jesse Owens received. And I imagine, my mind starts working and imagining what must have been like for Mack Robinson to come home and see his friends and his family, and they celebrated. I'm sure they celebrated with him. Said, congratulations, don't worry about it. You did great. Look how fast you ran that race. And I'm sure Mack Robinson in the more jovial times probably joked around with his boys and his family members, made excuses about why he didn't win that race, had a little braggadocio saying, oh man, I could beat Jesse Owens. My shoes were a little bit too tight that day. I imagine all that thing. But I also imagine that Mack Robinson probably was deeply affected too. Deeply affected. That in his quiet time, his alone time, that he contemplated what second place really meant. That for him, 4/10 of a second altered his life. But I started thinking that our failures are not just ours alone. And some of you know this. Some of you have been inspired by your failures, where you are parents now, that you push your children in certain direction, certain ways based on your failures, because you do not want them to experience the same thing. Some of you have seen other people in your life who have let you down, and it has inspired you to be greater, to become the person you are today. I have to think there was a little bit of that for Mack Robinson. I'm sure people looked at him and watched him and said, "Ah, oh, poor Mack Robinson," but not everyone did that. Mack Robinson understood the way things were. He did. He understood that segregation was real, that there were limitations to his success during the time in which he was living. He understood that even in his own country, in a sport like baseball, that some of the best baseball players could not play with other ball players because of the color of their skin. Mack Robinson understood this. And there were people who were watching. He had a sibling who started watching him very closely and became inspired by his older brother's goals and trying to be successful in what he did very well. And his younger brother took that to heart, and his younger brother saw the way that his older brother's life was altered because of 4/10 of a second. And his younger brother took that upon his shoulder and understood the idea of what was happening in his country, understood the idea that second place doesn't mean that you finished off last, that second place could be a very important role, even if you're classified as a second place citizen, that you can still make the impact that can affect future generations. And so that's what his younger brother did. He got inspired, and it just made him work even harder. And on April 15th, every year now, when baseball season has just started, well, everybody in the world knows his brother. Everybody knows now the name Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson, who has had songs, books, movies, speeches, told about the legend of Jackie Robinson, that he had the perfect demeanor to be the person who is going to integrate baseball. Jackie Robinson was inspired by his brother's 4/10 of a second loss. One of my favorite songs, written by the singer-songwriter Dan Byrne, in the chorus says, "Where would Willie Mays have been if it weren't for Jackie Robinson?" Jackie Robinson was inspired by the 4/10 of a second and used his brother's loss in the 1936 Olympics to go on and do something that no other person had done before. Jackie Robinson was inspired to be the first. Second place is not just about us. Finishing off last is not just about us. It's about all of those who are watching us and how we take the loss and we use it to inspire those behind us to succeed. Where would Willie Mays have been if it weren't for Jackie Robinson?